Hi, I'm Jennifer Moore and I weave a lot of double weave, and I'm the author of the Weaver's Studio Double Weave, and I teach a lot of workshops in double weave. And just about always when I'm setting up a double weave warp, I'm winding with at least 2 warp ends at the same time, but I also often work with 4 warp ends at the same time because I'm doing a gradation of one color to another and often doing a rotation of multiple colors at the same time. So what I'd like to do today is demonstrate how I wind 4 colors of warp at the same time, as well as my process for doing a rotation from one set of colors to another set of colors. So today I'm going to be winding a warp that is 3 yards long, and I'm going to have 6 different sections, each of which is going to have 48 threads in it. I'm going to be working with these 6 colors here: a blue, green, yellow, orange, red, and purple. But I'm only going to be working with 4 threads at a time and moving from one sequence of colors to the next sequence of colors. And I'm going to demonstrate 3 sections on the warping board, and then I'm going to demonstrate the last 3 sections on a warping reel so that you can see how it works with both types of equipment. So I like to start out by having a piece of yarn for each of my sections. So I have 6 pieces of yarn here that I'm going to tie off my sections, and they're roughly about 8, 9, 10 inches long. So I've got them all ready to go. And I'm going to be working with this cone holder here. And this is a really great thing if you happen to have one. This happens to be one that's made by Leclerc, and it's really great. It has the capability of holding up to 8 cones at a time, but we're just going to be working with 4. And with 4 threads, we have just the right number of fingers to have a thread in between each of our fingers, which is very important. That's going to be critical in winding this warp, because by keeping them separate in our hand, that's going to keep the threads from twisting around each other, barber pulling, and creating a mess as you are winding your warp onto your loom. So I'm going to begin by starting with my blue and putting it on the first dowel here to hold the spool. Then my green, then the yellow, and then the orange. So I'm just taking them in order, starting with the blue. And if you happen to be taking my double rainbow workshop, this is exactly what you're going to be doing and the colors that you're going to be working with. Finally, the orange. So I've got them all going through a little loop here that holds them in place. If you don't happen to have something like this, you can make up a makeshift thing. You can make your own cone holder pretty easily with a board and with dowels. You can also, if you don't have something like that, take flower pots and turn the flower pots upside down on top of your cones of yarn and have the end of the yarn coming through the hole at the bottom of the flower pot, and that'll serve the same purpose to keep your threads separate. So once I have these set up, the 4 colors, I'm going to take the end of each one and put them together. So they're all coming up like that, and see how they're nice and separate. And I'm going to be winding a 3-yard warp, and I happen to know that my warping board is 1 yard across, so I don't even have to measure. I just know that I'm going to go 3 widths of the warping board. If you need to, you can measure the length of your warp and put up a guide string on your warping board. But I'm just going to take the 4 ends all together here, and I'm going to make a loop around my fingers like that, and then take this end and pull it up through the loop. And then if I cinch that, I've got a loop here that's going to go on a peg at the bottom end of my warp, on the warping board, right there. And I'm going to move these out of the way for the time being. And I'm going to take these 4 ends just in the order that they're coming off of the pegs here and line them up on my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. So see how I've got them coming right in order through my fingers, just as they're coming off of the spool rack. And so my fingers are going to act like a comb, and they are going to hold on to the warping, the threads, the warp threads. And the important thing to remember is you don't want your hand twisting and turning. This is just going to be the holder of the threads. And so you want to keep your hand basically in the same position. It will move along the pathway of the warp, but it's not going to be twisting and turning as it goes. So I'm going to use this, my left hand, my other hand, to guide the threads. And so this hand, my right hand, is closer to the cones of yarn, and I'm just going to carry it along and create the path of my warp with my left hand, and my right hand is just kind of following along and holding the position of the 4 warp ends. And this is where I'm making my cross. So I went over this peg, and now I'm going to go under this peg and under this one, and now I'm going to go over these 2 and under this one. And then I continue on following the pathway of my warp. So now I'm back at the bottom again. I can let go with my left hand as long as I hang on with my right. And traveling up to the top is 1, and traveling back down to the bottom is 2. So I need, I'm going to be winding 48 threads in this section with this group of colors, but since I'm winding 4 threads at a time, that means I only have to do 12 passes to create the 48 threads. So that was 1 going up, 2 coming back down. And I'm going to keep on going. There's 3. There's 4. And see how smoothly these are coming off because of my hand keeping them separate. There's 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. And see how my right hand holding the threads, it's not really, it's traveling with me, but it's not twisting around. So it's not introducing any new twist to the yarn. There's 10. 11. And 12. And now that I've gotten to the 12, which is the end of this section, I'm just going to wrap this around a couple times to hold it in place for a second. And now I'm going to come up to the top end post, and I'm going to take one of these pieces of string that I started out with, and I'm going to kind of gather all these together right at the very end of the end post. So right at the very end of it here. And so I came through that whole group, and then I'm going to take one end and go around the whole group a second time. And that's going to enable me to gather these up into a nice tight bundle. And then I'm going to tie it nice and snug with a square knot, like that. And now I'm gonna push this back, and after each section I like to push the whole warp back to make more room on the warping board. Okay, so that's one section. Now I'm going to take off my first color, the blue. So I'm going to cut off the blue thread, and I'm going to leave about an extra inch from the end of the end peg here. And it's okay that it drops down like that. We'll fix that up. And I'm going to take off the blue. And the blue now goes to the end of the line. And a really neat thing about this particular piece of equipment here is I can now pick up and move them over and put this back on. Move the yellow one over. Put it back on. Move the orange over and put it back on. And now I'm going to add on the red, the next color in line, and it comes to the end of the sequence. If you don't have a nifty thing like this where you can remove the threads and take them out and move them over, you can also always cut all four ends, move them into the right position, and then retie all four. It works just the same way. But I'm going to take my new red thread and the end of the blue one that I cut off. I'm going to put the two of them together as if they were one and do a simple overhand knot. And hopefully that comes right to the end of this end peg here. Okay, so now we have a new color sequence, and again they're coming straight up off of the spool rack, and I'm going to get them into my fingers exactly in the order that they're coming off of here. And now I'm going to repeat that process with my new set of four colors. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we have another section, and see how quick and easy that is? It makes such a huge difference having your cones of yarn lined up and held in place so they can't fall over, and they're being kept separate from each other on my fingers and they don't get tangled up around each other. So I'm going to do the same thing with this group. I'm going to take another one of my cords here, gather those up into a bundle, go right around to the end of the post, and then wrap one end around the post a second time around the whole bundle, and gather it nice and tight into a group and tie a square knot. And then I'm going to push the warp back again to make some more room. And again, I'm going to go to my first color here, which is the green now, and it's going to drop out. And I'm going to cut it off, leaving about an extra inch from the end of the end post. Take off the green, and it now goes to the end of the line. I'm going to move my yellow up to position number 1, the orange up to position 2, the red up to position 3. Oops. And now the purple comes in. Next one in line goes to position 4. And I'm going to take my new purple end and the green end that I cut off, and I'm going to put them together and do a simple overhand knot. And now it comes right to the end of the bottom end post. So once again, I'm going to get my 4 threads coming straight off of the cones in order, line them up in my fingers like that, and start the process again. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Wrap it a couple times and tie off this bundle that I just finished winding. So again, I'm going to take my cord, go through the bundle right at the end post, wrap one end around a second time, gather it up nice and snug, and make a square knot. So now we have half of the warp finished. I've wound 3 out of my 6 bundles, and I'm going to take this off the warping board and do the second half on the warping reel. But first, very, very importantly, I have to tie off the cross. So I have some other cords over here for doing that. And there's various ways of tying crosses, and I am going to simply go on one side, bring the 2 ends through the middle, crossing them, and then tie them down, tie this cross down here, the cord, and so that's creating a figure 8 inside of here. And I'm going to take a second cord and do the same thing on this side of the cross. So this comes through this way, and this end comes through this way. Both are going to come down to the bottom, and tie that off. And you don't want to tie too tightly. You want to leave some play in here, because this is going to go onto your lease sticks when you bring your warp to your loom, and these are eventually going to get cut once they're onto the lease sticks, and you don't want them so tight that there's any danger of cutting through your warp itself. And I'm also going to tie one choke tie here to hold the whole thing together for the time being. And I've got a little bit heavier and longer cord here. It's maybe about 16 inches long. And I'm going to, about halfway through the warp, wrap it around twice around the bundle, because then I can gather it up nice and snug. But I don't want to tie a square knot. I want something that I can pull out easily, so I'm going to tie a bow tie like you're tying a shoe. So that'll keep it nice and in place while we're getting it to the loom, but it'll also be really easy to pull out without having to cut it. So now, this end up at the top where your cross is what's going to go onto the back of your loom. You're going to be doing a back to front warping for double weave, which maybe you haven't done before, and there's lots of books and so forth to show you how to wind on a warp from the back. But with double weave and with winding multiple threads at the same time, it works a lot better going from the back of the loom to the front rather than the front to the back, because there's less opportunity for the threads to twist around each other, since they're going through the lead sticks, which are combing the threads as you're winding it onto the back beam. So this is the end that's going to go on the front of your loom, and we're going to cut this end. So I'm going to unwind what I have here. I'm going to hold on tight to this so it doesn't go springing off. I'm going to cut the ends that I was just winding, and then I'm going to cut this end of my warp just by bringing my scissors right to the end of the end post. And hang on tight. And I'm going to start chaining my warp. And if you haven't come across this piece of information before, it's really handy to know. If you chain your warp using your same hand, say your right hand, each time to pull the next section through, you're adding on a twist, going in the same direction every time you do that. And so you're adding twists to your warp. So I've just done this with my right hand. Now if I put my left hand through the next time to grab the next section to pull through, and then alternate with my right hand and then with my left hand, right hand, and then left hand, then the two twists balance each other out and you're not adding any additional twist to your warp. And I just go as far as my cross is, and then I am going to pull this off. And so I've got my first warp chain, and it's half of my warp ready to go onto the loom. These ends that you tied are what are going to go onto your back warping rod, and this is ready to go. And I'll demonstrate the second half of this warp with a warping reel. And I've got my warping reel set up on the counter here, and I'm going to be winding 3 more sections on the warping reel, and again they'll be 3 yards long, and my warping reel happens to be exactly 2 yards all the way around, so I know that I can go 1.5 times around the reel to get a 3-yard warp. And I left my cones of yarn set up in this order from the last section: yellow, orange, red, and purple. And now I'm going to take the first one off, the yellow one off, and it now goes to the end of the line. And the orange moves up into position 1. The red moves up into position 2. The purple moves up to position 3. And now I'm going to take the blue, which is next in line, and put it into position 4. And now I'm going to take my 4 threads in order: orange, red, purple, and blue. And just how I started the first section on the warping board, I'm going to take the 4 of them together, I'm going to wrap a loop around my fingers, and then bring this end through to make a loop that is going to go onto the bottom end post here. And then, oops, my orange came out, so I'm going to put them back in here. And I'm going to take my 4 threads in order as they come off here, so that they're going through my 4 fingers that are keeping them separate from each other. And I'm going to start winding again. And this will go even faster and easier than the warping board did, because we get to just spin it around. And I can actually just hang on with this hand and then use my left hand to create the pathway and go around the cross and then spin again. So that was 1 up to the top, and then now 2 to the bottom, 3 up to the top, 4 to the bottom, 5, 6, 7, 8, and watch as I go around the cross. I'm using my hand to follow along, but I'm not turning it to add any more twists. So that was 9, 10, 11, and 12. And I can actually just let go, drop these, because they're not going to go anywhere. And then I'm going to grab the next cord, and I'm going to go right to the end of the top end post here, just like I did on the warping board, and wrap this around twice. Into a nice snug bundle and make a square knot. And push it back, and then I'm going to bring this back around, and now I'm going to go through the rotation, and I'm going to take off the orange, cut off the orange, leaving about an extra inch, and it now goes to the end of the line. The red moves over to position 1. Purple moves over to position 2. Blue moves over to position 3. And now the next one in line is the green. And it goes into position 4. And I'll take the new green end and the orange end that I cut off, put the 2 of them together, and tie an overhand knot. And now I'm going to pick up my 4 warp threads in the order they're coming off of the warping, the cone rack. So I've got red, purple, blue, and green, and I'm going to start again. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So I'm finished with that group, and I'm going to take the next cord, get my whole group, and wrap it around the whole bundle here, gather it up nice and tight, and tie a square knot. So now, ready for the next color sequence. The red comes off, so I'm gonna leave about an inch. Take off the red, and it goes to the end of the line now. Purple goes to position 1. Blue goes to position 2. Green goes to position 3. And the next one in line is the yellow, and it goes into position 4. And I'm going to take my new yellow end and the red end that I cut off, put them together and tie an overhand knot. And I'm ready for my next group. So again, I'm going to take them in order as they come off of the spool rack with my fingers between them to keep them separate, and start going again. This guy popped out, so come back in. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And I'm going to take my last cord here for tying bundles and gather this group together, going around twice, tying it into a nice tight bundle with a square knot. And I'm going to tie off the cross in the same way that I did in the last group that was on the warping board. So I'm going to go through the center on both sides, bringing the ends together. Actually, I'm going to do a little tie like this. Knot, and same thing on the other side. Again, keeping the ties nice and loose. Okay. So the cross is tied off nice and securely here. And then I'm going to go to about the halfway position of the warp and tie a choke cord. So I'm going to go around the whole bundle twice so I can gather it up nice and tight, and then do the bow knot like tying a shoe so that it'll untie easily. And now I can cut off all 4 ends here at the end post. And so we're done with those, and if we were to continue, we've gone all the way around the sequence now. If we were to continue, the blue would move up to position 1, which is where it started at the beginning of winding the warp. So we've gone through the entire color rotation. And once again, I'm going to cut the ends of my warp, hanging on to them nice and snugly at my bottom end post. And you have to hang on a little bit with the warping reel because it is going to spin and you don't want it to spin out of control. So again, I'm going to pull through with my right hand and then with my left, then with my right, then with my left, alternating so that the twists that I'm adding are undoing each other as I go. And then when I get up to the cross, I pull it off, and this section is ready to go onto the loom as well. So now our whole warp is complete and ready to be tied onto the back of the loom and ready for winding the warp and threading the heddles, sewing the reed, and so forth. So you're all set to go with your warp now.